Hello, my name is Karina, and in this podcast, Break Fear, Find Freedom, I have conversations with people just like you who have broken their fear and found their freedom, whatever that may be. And shows you how to do the same. So sit back, relax, grab your coffee or your running shoes, whatever makes you happy, and let the fun begin. Oh, by the way, come take my hand and let's go. The door's opening now. Hello, everybody. Today we've got a really awesome guest, Dr. Gurpreet Padda. And Dr. Gurpreet has so many facets to talk about with this break fear, but we will just hone in on one particular one today, and then probably have a series. But we'll see how the episode goes. Hello, Dr. Gurpreet. How are you today?
I'm doing very well. Thank you for hosting me.
Thank you for being here. That's such an honor and a pleasure to have you. Dr. Gurpreet, tell us a bit who Dr. Gurpreet is, and tell us who you are.
Sure. So, it may seem unusual. You have a physician on a podcast that is talking about fear and entrepreneurship. But I have I'm 56 going on 57 now. And I feel like I may have lived a few lifespans. I relocated from India when I was probably 8 or 9. I grew up in India, in the north part of India, when India was experimenting with socialism. My family relocated and they came for better opportunity in the US. I spoke not one word of English when I landed, except for the word bathroom. And that's all I knew. We moved to the inner city and I didn't know what America was, because when I looked around, I was in the urban core of St. Louis, and I was in the ghetto. This is, we were living in a very impoverished area. I didn't have a vision of things outside, but I knew where we had come from, which was a socialist state. India is a democracy, but at that point they were experimenting with socialism, and they were experimenting with vouchers and ways to get food, and you have to have a ticket in order to accumulate enough grain or rice. And it was a top-down economy, and so there was not a lot of production of food. And so we came from an area that had a lot of food, but you couldn't get it. And we came to the US and we lived in an impoverished area, but oh my God, you could get anything you wanted. And so that was the beginning of entrepreneurship for me, because I thought, you can get anything you want in this country, and you don't have to have political connections to go get a voucher so that you can get 50 of these vouchers so you can participate in getting a motor scooter 5 years from today, because you had to have hundreds of vouchers and you had to sign up for it. And 5 years later, if you got the lottery right and you had the right political connections, you could buy a motor scooter or you could buy XYZ. I didn't have access to toys in India. So I played with sticks and mud and created my own stuff. So I came from an area that had a lot of resources, but we couldn't get access to them, to an area that had a lot of resources and you could get access to them, but the local community didn't recognize it. So my kids that I was growing up with felt impoverished because they had access to things, but they didn't know how to get that access. And so it was a different kind of impoverishment. So I immediately began to be an entrepreneur and began to hustle. And I made a lot of mistakes. My first little venture was I sold door-to-door greeting cards to LaQuanda and to Quisha and, Mr. Smith and blah, blah, blah. And the thing was, I was customizing these greeting cards and I was prepaying for them in September, October. They were arriving in December. When I went to deliver them, those people were gone. So I had prepaid for their greeting cards and they were customized. No one else could use them because they had first and last name on them, but those people were gone. Or by December, they didn't want to buy them anymore and I had already paid for them. And there's no way that a little 8 or 9 year old kid is going to get an adult to pay for something they don't want to pay. So that entrepreneurial error was one of the first realizations that things could go horribly wrong, even in this great culture. And so I was really interested in science. I was really interested in entrepreneurship, and I was constantly looking around. And even as a little kid, I can remember seeing a go-kart track going, I wonder how they make money at that. I wonder how much money they make. And how many carts do you have to run? And eventually it became financial models in my head because I loved mathematics. So that was the initial part. Eventually we moved to the county, and I went to a public school in the county, and there was a whole different group of people. And now I realized that I was culturally different. The first group of kids were all black. The second group of kids were all white, but I was brown and I wore a turban. I actually met discrimination in the second group of kids because the first group of kids was so impoverished that they didn't have time to discriminate against anybody. But I got to discrimination when I met all the white kids because they didn't understand a kid with a turban who spoke English. And that kind of kept me on the outside. It allowed me to observe the culture and examine what was going on, but I was never part of the culture. I was looking at the culture. It's like working in your business or working on your business. I was working on the social aspect of it, but I was not in the social aspect of it. So I had an opportunity to examine from the outside. And that, I think, was profound for me. And that stuck with me my whole life, to look at things from an outsider's perspective. Always to look at it from an outsider's perspective. It gives you a different dimension of reality. You get to see more than just where you're at. I eventually ended up cutting grass for people, mowing lawns, doing a little bit of landscaping, and then eventually ended up doing more stuff than just that. I figured out that I knew more. I had some talent, and I could do a little minor carpentry. And then people started to ask me to do more stuff, more repair. And so eventually, by the time I was 14, 15, 16, I hired people to work for me. I hired laborers to work for me. I hired construction people, and they were in their 40s, 50s, and 60s. And I was 14 and 15. And so they would drop me off at high school, and I would go to school, and then I would touch base with them by the phone in the cafeteria. And they would call me at noon and tell me what they were up to. And then they would pick me up at the end of the day, and we'd go inspect the job sites. And that taught me the concept of managing people. And so that progressed, and I eventually went to medical school, and I did trauma first, trauma surgery, and then anesthesia, and then interventional pain, and then addiction. And mostly I do a lot of being a full-time physician, but I started off in that entrepreneurial world first, and I've maintained that. Between my business partner and I, we probably have about 30 companies. We do a lot of commercial real estate, and we're willing to make mistakes because mistakes are the only way that you learn. And, fear is a natural part of approaching a new thing. And we're willing to recognize that fear is an emotion, but the fear is something that may not even be real. And so we constantly are looking at projects going, oh my God, we could totally screw up and we could lose a lot of money, or we could screw up and people would make fun of us, or this could happen or that could happen. And so we've managed to deal with those aspects of uncertainty and fear by recognizing them, and then having our mindset always look at, does this crash the plane? I always look at things and ask myself when I get on a plane, or when I start a project, or when I do anything, what are the top 10 things that are going to make this fail? What are the top 10 things in anesthesia? What are the top 10 things that are going to make this patient die during the anesthesia? What are the top 10 things that are going to kill this patient? What are the top 10 things that are going to kill this business venture? If you start off recognizing those top 10 things, or 12 or 14 or whatever you want to set it at, and not do those, then that's usually 99% of your failure. And if you can avoid doing those things and pre-identify them, you can manage to not do them. It's the people always say, well, don't talk about the things that you don't want to have happen. And I agree with that, because if you're, riding a bicycle and you're at the edge of a cliff and you keep looking over the cliff, you're going to drive right into the cliff. But,
Yes, yes.
the issue is that if you're riding a bicycle at the edge of the cliff and you don't think that falling off the cliff is going to kill you, you're probably going to fall off that cliff. Whereas if you recognize that that's one of the top 10 things that's going to kill you, then maybe you're not going to be on that cliff, or maybe you're going to hug the other edge, or maybe you're going to figure out a different way to manage that risk. And so fear is really the emotion that may be real or may not be real. It may be of an actual fact that can occur, but it's your interpretation of it. And so I always encourage people to recognize, why is it that they're afraid? What is it they're afraid of? And what part of that is real? And if they failed, what would be the outcome from that failure for that component? And a lot of times you'll find out that it's not as bad as you think. And sometimes you'll find out it's way worse than you think, and you really need to avoid the situation altogether. So that's kind of my background. I started off as a little brown kid with a turban. I'm still a little brown kid with a turban. I started off being entrepreneurial. I'm still entrepreneurial. I started off loving science and math. I still love science and math, although I think I've become better at interpreting data points. I've become better at taking a big, deep breath and resetting myself when I'm facing a situation that's extremely challenging or difficult, and then trying to get through it that way.
I love this. And I have to just go back. I love the way, and people need to understand that how culture makes such a big difference, because I think most people don't realize it. It's simple things like, I was talking to a Greek person yesterday, and I know it's just off topic, but it's just when a lady sees a beautiful person or a beautiful child, they spit at them, right? Because that's to protect them against the gods. So that's stuck to protect them, because they believe that if they don't, they'll do that, and so that they won't get cursed. Now, if you put that kind of scenario in suburban America, for example, where I'm living right now, and you do that, I mean, the mother would be horrified, because it's like, hey, why is that mother spitting at my child? What is wrong with her? And it would become a big issue, or something like that. And with you experienced that with when you came into the ghetto, you saw that your mindset was so different, because those people were victims and you weren't. So what I'm saying is, really, how can people change that kind of mindset here, because they don't know any better?
So I actually have a couple of ways that I've approached that. I'm going to give you another example of culture, and just to understand the cultural aspect. So when I was in medical school, and near the end of my medical school, I went and did tropical medicine, tropical disease in Papua New Guinea. And I lived on Palm Island. I lived with Aboriginals, and I lived with headhunters. And I spent quite a bit of time. I spent about 6 months there. And I had just been there after they had eaten somebody. They had literally eaten a white guy that had been there right before me. And the guy was wearing his glasses when I showed up. Wow. Now, I had some cultural sensitivity to them already. I'd done some research on it, and I recognized right away that no matter what I did, I could not arrive after sundown, because I would be perceived as an evil spirit. And I knew that because I'd done a lot of reading. And so I actually got there, and it was close to sundown. So I went out in the canoe, and I stayed in the water all night and made sure that my canoe never touched ground. And I went away from the village, even though I had gotten to the village close to sundown. I was like, I can't take a chance. So I have to go away from the village and not let them see me, until daytime tomorrow. Because if I show up, they may perceive me wrong. So by the time I showed up the next day, they were incredibly friendly. But the guy that had gotten eaten had showed up at night, and he thought they were going to rescue him and feed him, and instead they ate him. And this was not that long ago. This was in 1988. so we're not talking like in the 1700s. And so there are cultural sensitivities that you have to have, and having the knowledge of your problem is really the first part of overcoming your fear. If you don't have the knowledge of your problem, then your fear will be expanded and irrational. Yeah, I was afraid, but I also knew that I could control the situation by preventing my own stupidity and showing up at dark, because they would think that I was an evil spirit. And so I knew that culturally. So that's one of the things that, that culture is so important to understanding where you're going. You have to be able to have emotional intelligence about the people that you're interacting with. So much of what we do has to be emotionally intelligent. And I almost find that if you're introverted, you actually are better off. If you're so extroverted that you don't recognize those clues that people are giving, you're more likely to not gain information. If you spend all of your time talking and none of your time listening, you're not going to have that emotional intelligence to interpret those subtle clues that the environment is giving you, and that the people around you are giving you. So, I mean, you really have to become a student of studying people to then learn yourself. And those are some of the tools that I used early on to understand culture.
Yes. So would you say that obviously if people understand the environment, understand the people, listen, do you think that allays the fear almost? So that will that make going into whatever situation you're going into or doing whatever you want to do easier?
It does, because it's something that you can actually then have an expectation. A lot of fear deals with not knowing or exaggerating the expectation of outcome. If I told you that I was going to invest in a project and I was going to invest $10,000 in a project and I have a 12% rate of return, that means something to me. I could make $1,200. Or if I told you, well, you have a 12% rate of return, but you have, a 75% chance of losing everything, losing your principal. Well, that 12% gain is not worth my 75% loss. So I want to look at everything and ask myself, how do I minimize my loss opportunity and maximize my income? And how do I maximize my outcome with the least risk? And so you have to know where the alligators are under the surface, and don't get into the pond if there's alligators in that pond that are going to eat you. If there's no alligators in the pond and the worst thing that you might get bitten is by a piranha, then I can tolerate that, but I probably won't get in a pond with an alligator. And so you want to know what your downside risks are. And I have a lot of fear. I mean, so don't get me wrong. Like, I'm a scuba diver. I'm PADI certified. I do rescue dives. I've probably done hundreds of dives. And every time I get in the water, I'm still afraid, because it's a wide open place and I can't see the bottom and I have no idea what's lurking down there. And I know that it's an irrational fear, but I still am afraid. And so, when I'm in that situation, I go through my checklist. Do I have enough oxygen? Is my BCP working right? Do I have a buddy that I can count on? I go through my entire checklist of systems and make sure that I don't end up submerged at the bottom. I like I said, I've done a lot of traveling. I managed to get into a shark feeding frenzy once off the north coast of Australia. and I almost got eaten alive. And and that builds some degree of PTSD about being in open water, but that doesn't
Yes,
stop
yes.
me, because now when I do diving, I make sure I can see the bottom. I don't dive in areas that it's black below me. I'll
Yes,
dive off of a reef and I can see 100 feet down with good clarity, and I'll make sure that there aren't situations that I'm going to get eaten by sharks. So those fears are controllable if you can control the data points and understand your risk, and then it becomes enjoyable.
Okay, so what you're saying is, you have people that are so afraid they just hide, like they're shaking in the corner, and sometimes they don't even know what that fear is. So would you say, is it just step out and just do something, or step out and start journaling so that you understand yourself? What would be the best option for that person? Or
So
hiding under the covers, right? Away
right.
from
So
everything.
I always start with, and I tell my patients this all the time. I have a lot of patients with PTSD. I have a lot of patients that are veterans that have been exploded by mines, by IEDs. And they're in a hypersympathetic state, and even a slight noise will make them panic. And so journaling is certainly one thing that allows us to have some introspection. The mechanical act of writing and putting your information on paper is incredibly worthwhile. And it may change your paradigm if you ask yourself, the questions associated with your writing. Are these things actually, one, are they real? And two, can they actually hurt me? If I told you that, I could lose money on something, but the return was decent, that's not the same as I could lose my life on something and the return is decent. So I could lose money and that's not going to kill me, but I could lose my life and that will kill me. And so you have to look at what is the real risk. And certainly money is money, but you can always make more. But you can't make another life. And so you have to look at your outcome, and you have to look at your true downside risk. And once you make that determination, then you can go forward and say, okay, well, this is the true risk that I'm associating this with. And that's what I recommend my patients do. They certainly have them journal. I certainly have them figure out what their true risks are, what they're really afraid of. And I have them come back and review it, and figure it out. The other thing with risk sometimes, and so I'm giving you one aspect. One is get deep into it and look at it, examine it, have a texture with it, have a conversation with it, understand it, turn it around, look at the other side of it. What's the maximum risk? What's the minimum risk? Will this kill me? Will this destroy me? Or am I making it too big? That's certainly one aspect of it. The other side is, once you figure the negatives, then figure out the positives. What's the value of doing X, Y, Z, and what will it do? And once you know both the negative and the positive, then you can move forward in making changes. There's a book called Homo Prospectus. Homo Prospectus is an amazing book. And what it essentially tells you is your personality today is what you set it to be. What you are doing today is what you believe you're going to be in years from now. So your personality today is not the sum of your past. And that's what people always assume, that their personality today is the sum of their past. They talk about, well, I was assaulted when I was 10, and this happened, and this happened, and this happened. And that is why my behavior is this today. No, that's not true. See, we fabricate our memories continuously. Our memories are manipulated by our brain, and they're continuously augmented. Every time we relive a memory, we subtly change it. And the more times we relive it, the more subtlety there is in changing those memories. And so what we identify as our personality today is not really our past. It identifies us as what our future is. If you want a different future, change who you are today. Don't say, oh, I'm this way because of what happened to me in the past. Mm-hmm. You have to look at your future as who you identify yourself as today. So a practical example. If I tell everybody, hey, you know, I have fibromyalgia, I can't really get out of the house, I feel just miserable all day. And, you know, first of all, your body tone, your verbal tone, your body, everything is feeding into that personality. Yeah. What you're doing is you're telling your body, this is where I want to be 5 years from today. Whereas if you go, look, I had fibromyalgia and my life is so much better potential than that. And this is what I want to do. And I want to be a real estate entrepreneur, or I want to be a social media influencer, or I want to do this other thing. And these are the steps I'm going to concretely do. It shifts your focus from the past to the future. Mm-hmm. And if you shift your focus to the future, some of that fear of the past goes away, because the fear grows on those negative emotions. And I constantly discuss this with my patients that, you know, mm-hmm. You are not a product of your failed back surgery. You're not a product of your type 2 diabetes. That's where that's what caused this to be here, but that's not where you're going to be a year from now. So let's look at where you want to be. Let's live as if we want to go. And this is not hocus pocus quantum stuff of the law of attraction. You know, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about how your brain perceives your reality. And if you can reframe that reality, it makes a huge difference.
Oh, so what you're saying is that person there needs to just take one thing to shift, right? That person's in the corner shaking with fear needs to just come up with one little thing to shift and realize that this isn't they're not their past. They haven't been abused or whatever they have, because people tend to just sit in that past and in that dirty water forever. And then they can just shift everything and get out of that and become this great person, if that's what they want to do. So
yeah. So there's a ceremony. It's called a Ho'oponopono. It's a Hawaiian ceremony of forgiveness. It's an amazing ceremony. I do this with my patients sometimes, especially the ones that have suffered severe trauma and continue to relive their trauma. It's the ceremony of forgiveness. It's an amazing ceremony in which you clip the linkages to your past and let them go. If you want to talk about a paradigm change that happens in a second, once you de-emotionalize the past memory, you almost forget the memory because you've taken the emotion away. See, it's the emotion that's causing you the discomfort. If it's just a dry memory, it is what it is. I mean, you know, yeah, I broke my leg and I broke my nose and I fell off the side of a mountain 3 years ago when I was mountain biking in Copper Canyon in Mexico, but I de-emotionalized that memory. And instead I looked at, well, what are the things that I learned from that experience? And I learned that I could set my own leg, and I learned that I could set my own nose. And I learned that the local veterinary shop had plenty of benzathine penicillin, but the needle was really huge and stabbing it in my thigh hurt like hell. And tequila was good. And so, you know, if you de-emotionalize it, you certainly will not lose your memory, but you'll lose the emotional charge to that memory, which will then reduce your fear associated with that memory. And then you look instead at the past, you look at the future. What do I want to become? What do I want to do? What's my target? And start living in that future target zone. That makes a huge difference. You have to have the insight. And that's why I love journaling. I think journaling is amazing. I love goal setting. I have a little, every day I set what are the top 1 to 3 things I'm going to accomplish today. And I put it on a piece of sticky pad, and I have a bunch of them pre-cut. I bought them on Amazon, and they have a hole cut through them, and they have the words today die cut through it. And I take that and I stick it on my mirror. And so when I'm brushing my teeth in the morning and looking at that mirror, it's right there today. 1, 2, 3. These are the 3 things I have to accomplish. And I have to get these done to move forward. And so I have my nighttime ritual, which is when I think about things and I give my brain an assignment overnight, what do I need to figure out for tomorrow? How did my day go? What do I need to figure out? What am I grateful for? What do I have to figure out for tomorrow? And then tomorrow, that last night, I wrote down, these are the 3 things I have to accomplish first thing before I do anything else. And, realize that human beings change incrementally. We don't change 300% in a day. We change 1%, but we change 300% in a year. And if you change 1% in a day, you'll change 300% a year. But you're not going to make massive change all at once. You're going to make minimal change, and it's going to look like it's not even going anywhere. But, it's compounding. It compounds over time. It accelerates over time by 1% a day.
I love that. And because as you were speaking, I was thinking about how many people have these huge goals, and then they look at it and it's like, whoa, it's too big, like the story of how to eat an elephant. But sometimes you don't know how to eat that elephant. You don't know that you need how to cut it up, and you don't actually know how to create the goals because it's just too big. And that could just sometimes paralyze you in fear. So how would you do that? How would you eat an elephant? Besides being one piece at a time, but how do you get to those pieces?
Yeah, and so and that actually is one of the big problems that we deal with, because we have an abundance of opportunity, more than we've ever had in our history.
Yes,
we've never had this much opportunity ever as a human, as a group, as humans. We have too many choices. And so what you have to do is, 1, limit your own choices. Make a decision of what you want to do. You're gonna get to all of the things you want to do only if you limit your decisions to just 1 or 2 things that you really want to accomplish, and look at the processes to do that. So I do a lot of mind mapping. Whenever I use a tool called MindNode, because my mind thinks graphically. So MindNode is a very simple tool that just allows me to put all my bullet points together, and for a particular project. I constantly, I have bad ADD. And so I constantly have a new idea. I have maybe 6 a day, and I do a lot of lucid dreaming. So I get a lot of ideas, and I basically, on my notes, on my phone, on my computer, I have a folder that I put my idea down, and I stick it in that folder, and it goes into the someday folder. And then sometimes I look at that at the end of the week and go, too hard. And then I move it to the too hard folder, because I'm not going to be able to do it. So I keep my projects pretty organized, and then I break them down in individual parts. And I always look for synergy between one project to another. Is this domino going to affect 2 or 3 different things? And so I sequentially organize my projects, because I do a lot of different stuff. I do interventional pain, I do addiction, I do reversing diabetes, I deal with PTSD, I do sleep. And then on the real estate side, we do multifamilies, we do restaurants, bars, nightclubs, we do other practices, we do acquisitions. I'm in the technology space. We have computer patents that we're working on. So you can't do all of it at once, because you'll get paralyzed. What you do is you break it down to just what you need for the one project. Put everything else off and come back to it. But you have to put it in a folder, because otherwise what happens is you have something in your brain called a PAPEZ circuit, a PAPEZ. And if you don't write it down and put it away, your brain's still thinking about it. And so it will intrude in your thoughts constantly, because you'll get another thought that goes, hey, I could do that. Oh, hey, remember, I could do that. Oh, hey, remember. And so we all have this short attention span theater going on. And we constantly get these recurring messages from our brain that say, hey, you didn't close this loop. And we have to close our loops. If we don't close our loops with these other things that we can't do right now, by putting them away, write them down, put them away, knowing that you can come back and look at it, then you can focus in on the few things that you should do. Focus is the one thing that probably gets you the longest term and highest yield. And it also gives you an opportunity to study a problem and its complexities and really identify your up and down risk. And so you really have to have a methodology for that focus.
Yes, but now that's also, also, the focus is always such a big thing now, especially now because you've got your phone, you've got your computer, you're doing this, you're doing that, there's always just things and things and things to do. So do you actually like relax and switch off your computer at a certain time and then just spend time focusing on what you need to focus? So do you have an evening ritual where you do those kind of things, or do you meditate and spend that time to focus on on whatever project you're working on?
Yeah, I have a ritual where I get up very early in the morning. I typically get up about 3:30 a.m. And I am, by the time that, and I work out at about 7:15, and I'm in my clinic by 8:30. But from 3:30 to about 7:15, I'm doing all my business stuff. And then I'm in the clinic. And then I'm very routinized. The less choices that you give yourself, the more efficient your life is. So all my clothes are easy to pick out because they're all monochromatic and there's slight color changes of each other. And I essentially have one kind of shirt that I like, one kind of pant that I like, or one kind of shorts. And, I wear scrubs. And so I don't give myself a lot of choices because I don't want to waste my brain power thinking about what am I going to wear today. I also don't waste a lot of brain power thinking, what am I going to eat today? So I'll have a small amount of food, typically the same thing, which is an egg or eggs at around 11 o'clock. And that's what I'll eat for lunch. And then I'll have dinner, and it's typically the same thing every day. And maybe once a week or twice a week, if I need to do something else, I'll have a little bit more extravagant of a meal, but I'll use my meals as times to connect to other people. Those are social events for me. When it's a utilitarian concept, then it's very minimal and it's just what I need. And I don't want to have a lot of choices. And it also keeps you from overeating because you have something called sensory specific satiety. If you have a variety of choices of food, all of a sudden you develop an ice cream belly a belly just for ice cream, and a belly for steak, and a belly for the bread. And, every time you change the food profile of what you're eating in that meal, your brain knows that it can eat more. And so sensory specific satiety, by making it very uniform and simple, keeps you from overeating. And so it does other things as well because it becomes cheaper to function. Because I don't have to go buy thousands of dollars worth of clothes because I know what I like and I just stick to that. And I don't have to have a lot of choices in that. It makes it awfully bland as in terms of my clothing choices, but that's not where I want to focus. I want to focus on the other creative aspects of my life. So I do. And then at the end of the day, I have a wind down time where I turn off all input. And essentially, the only thing I have is a piece of paper and a pen to write with. And I use red lighting in where I'm sleeping. And so I don't really let any blue light in after about 6 p.m. And then I have a very specific, I'm going to go to bed by 8:30 or 9. And that's it. I'm going to turn everything off, but I'm not going to have any blue light after probably 6 p.m. So I don't have television as an intrusion in my life. I don't have social media as an intrusion. I don't have those things because they don't benefit me. They might benefit me, but they really don't. And so I don't really need them. Now, that doesn't mean I don't watch any TV at all. Like, I will watch a movie or something, but because of my ADD, I can only get about 15 minutes into a movie before I lose interest. And so it took me, I can't tell you how long it took me to watch Game of Thrones. I think it took me as long as it took them to produce it, because I could only get about 15 minutes at a time. And then every time I, have to go back a minute or two because I forgot what I was watching. But I try to control my environment to accomplish the tasks that I need, knowing that I have to have that control in order to have a good outcome. And certainly I'm willing to deviate from that for particular reasons, in order to socialize, in order to have business meetings, in order to do other things. I know that I'm deviating from my usual, and so then I make changes.
Oh, okay. That's really cool, because then that also minimizes the fear, right? Because it minimizes the unknowns in some way. So that's also very good. And I'm also very interested in having always the same food, because I love food. I'm Italian, but it's quite interesting how you have the same food, but it's not important to you. So it's just there for nutrients, really. So again, it's a change of mindset, right?
Yeah, and I've owned 5 restaurants. I own one of the largest. I own Hendrick's Barbecue. It's one of the largest barbecue restaurants in the Midwest. I used to be vegetarian, and when I was in my teens, and converted to eating meat also, probably when I was 19 or 20. Because I was in Kansas City, which is the home of barbecue, and got to know the owners of the barbecue restaurant. And eventually I started something called Hendrick's Barbecue. We seat 600 people.
Wow.
And I've also owned Sanctuaria, which is one of the top 10 cocktail bars. And we actually won Tales of the Cocktail, which is a high-end cocktail competition. So I think we came in second place or something like that, but we were in the top tier. So I love food. I mean, I'm a foodie. I love it. But I also know that the more different varieties of food I put on my palate, the more likely I am to gorge excessively. And I really look at food as a connection to human beings. So when I'm having that connection to other human beings, it's the company that I'm keeping. And that's why my restaurant company was called In Good Company. Food is an experience. It's not just the eating of the food. It's the environment that you're in. It's the people that you're with. It's the acoustics. It's the smell. It's the lighting. It's all of those environmental factors that determine your enjoyment factor. And so I understood it, and I ended up selling all of those companies in 2019 in October. We sold them because I was learning more and more about nutrition, and I wanted to change people's feeding behaviors and get them away from vegetable oils. And so that's hard to do when you own those restaurants. So I separated myself. I also owned a brewery. And those are the things that I consciously thought about and designed my future around, what do I need to do? And what do I see myself? What's my personality in the future? And that literally, I made a change in 1 week. Once I decided that my future was different, I put the restaurants up for sale, and we literally sold them in a week. And we were no longer restaurateurs in 1 week.
Wow, the power of making a decision. And that's also always so difficult, because so many people don't know what to do. Do I do this? Do I do that? Oh, I don't know. But again, what you're showing here is that you need to have the foresight or to understand where you want to go. So the decision is so much easier. So, wow, I love that. So when you have your dinner, do you have the perfect environment? Makes such a difference, right? With everything. And I think we don't take that so much into account either. It makes a difference whether you're going to move forward or whether you're going to be afraid or not sleep or eat too much or whatever it is.
Yeah. So, and I'll describe what I typically do. My business partner and her husband live close to where I live, and we have our business meeting at the end of the day. And so we'll have it as she and I will sit there and chat and go over what we need to do for today and tomorrow and next week and where we are with our projects. And that's the time that we get a chance to sit and talk. And I'll literally, have a hamburger with no bun and, a little bit of salad and that's what our typical dinner is. Now, when we do family dinners, which is typically once a week or twice a week, we'll go out to a nice place and, I'll have 8 or 10 folks with us and we'll all, because we've done this consistently since, even my kids were little, and my brother's kids are little, we all get together once a week as a group, and everybody just, it's a family gathering. And we just put everybody in the same place, and it allows you to gain the information from the little ones of how their lives are, and allows you to help guide them through their challenges, and which then teaches your own challenges. And so we have this habit that we've formed over the last 25, 30 years, that once a week, we're all going to be together for a family dinner every week. And of course, we miss a few weeks of the year because somebody's traveling or can't make it. But we're about 98%, 99% on that. And it's created an incredible bond between all the cousins, and it creates an incredible family opportunity. And it's not so overwhelming because you're doing it every day. You're doing it, and people are sharing their lives in a profound way, and we can give each other advice on how things are going. It creates just an incredible emotional bond, because you're bonding over food, which was the original purpose of food. Group eating was really to share the experience. You're sitting in a cave and you're talking about the bison that you hunted earlier today, and you almost got eaten by a lion, and you put that painting on the wall, and everybody shares their information and they share their food. And that's the purpose of group feeding, is to have that communality. And so we have that as a habit that we built into our system, and it's worked really well. We're very happy with it.
And it's really beautiful, because you find that, like with all the single parents, and you have mothers who are bringing up sons, and the sons don't get that mentorship from the father because the father's absent. At least here, you're supporting each other, and you're growing, and you've got the uncle who can help you with whatever problem you've got. And you also can verbalize it, which is very difficult for a lot of people, is to actually verbalize and say, this is what I'm feeling, I need the help. And a lot of people find that very difficult to do, is to actually ask for the help. So I love that system. It's really beautiful.
Thank you.
Oh, wow. This hour's just gone, like in 2 seconds. So if I'd love to have a follow-up on this. I think we need to have a series, right? If you don't mind.
Yeah,
where
absolutely.
can people find you? Where can people find you?
So the easiest way, if they have an entrepreneurial bent, go to info@redpillcapital.com. And that's capital with a K, KAPITAL.com. If it's more of a medical thing, it's probably better just to email me direct. And my direct email, which I respond, because if somebody really has a question and really has a struggle, I respond. My direct email is seva, SEVA, at Padda.com, PADDA.com. Seva means service to humanity. And that's my direct personal email. So if somebody really has a question, I'm happy to sit and chat. I'm not selling anything. So, I'm not trying to sell anything, but, I do want people to, to use their opportunities in life to enhance life for everyone. Once you get out of looking at your own belly button and you ask yourself, how can I help society? That really eliminates a lot of the issues that we deal with. Once you're no longer focused on your own belly button and you're looking at everybody else's belly button, it gives you an opportunity to really make a difference. And so, I'm happy to have a chat. If it's a pure medical issue, we have a whole host of medical sites, and we do all kinds of crazy stuff. But I suspect that, if it's financial, go through Red Pill, and I respond to that as well. And if it's a personal issue, my email direct is probably the easiest way.
Oh, thank you so much. Now, before we go, I'd like to, you've hinted to it the whole time we've been together, but what difference do you want to be in the world?
Yeah. So there's a couple things that drive me right now. And I'm in the process of elucidating those in a better way. I believe, and this is my personal opinion backed by some fact data points, our biggest issue in the United States is that we are facing a cataclysm of metabolic inflammation, and we're facing a cataclysm of obesity, hypertension, diabetes. We're facing a cataclysm of addiction. These are all interrelated problems, and they're dietary driven. The neuroinflammation that's associated with our current diet significantly aggravates all of the other things I just talked about. And it really represents about $1.3 trillion of direct and indirect healthcare expenditure per year, which is 2/3 of our healthcare expenditure. If we got control of that, it would be amazing. And so most of my waking day, I deal with patients with very complex medical problems that can be boiled down to severe inflammation and metabolic inflammation, which is dietary in nature. And so I spend my days trying to figure out how to improve people's outcome with regards to that and having them recognize those issues. So I have we have a section called www.reversediabetes.md, and we teach people how to reverse their diabetes. All the protocols are free on there. And we have over 7,000 patients now that have gotten rid of their diabetes. They're no longer on insulin. Their hemoglobin A1C is now less than 5.6, and they're not on these inflammatory drugs, and their lives are better. They lose the weight, they improve their mobility, they improve their brains. We face this cataclysm of oncoming Alzheimer's. Alzheimer's is an inflammatory process in the brain. It's really type 3 diabetes of the brain. It's insulin resistance. And so that's my larger mission right now, is to figure that out and figure out a large scale method to change health in the US. The opposition to that is big agriculture and big pharma, because big ag wants you to consume more food, and they're not doing it for some nefarious purpose, but they're trying to make money. And big pharma wants to have patented drugs, and you can't patent nutrition. And so they want to figure out a way that they can sell more patented drugs. And so, we have an entire medical system, the medical industrial complex system, that's geared toward selling more stuff. And I believe that that's the wrong direction. I believe that we can achieve health by creating resilience in our communities, by changing our nutrition, and having more localized production, getting away from processed foods, getting to the point where we understand what we're eating and consuming and how it impacts our brains. So that's my bigger vision.
Oh, that's a passion as well. So we'll have to have a follow up so that we can talk about that, because that is so important right now. Education. We could just educate and people can realize what they're doing to themselves. That's already something, right? So if you can change one person at a time, or help one person, or serve one person at a time, it will make a huge difference.
Yep.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Padda. This was amazing. Thank you so much. It's been such an honor and a pleasure to have you here. Thank you. And just one more thing now, before we go. What would you tell the audience right now to start their day, or to make their life better, just this moment?
I would tell them, you need to, the one thing that I think makes the biggest difference is identifying your goals, and realizing that you need to be concrete with those goals, and realizing it takes time to achieve those goals, and breaking down that goal setting into finite, discrete points. Once you identify your goals, then you can start to identify your impediments and the accelerators for your success. Once you can do that, then you can start creating the life that you want to live. But if you don't ever identify your goal clearly, you're going to end up with mediocrity. And mediocrity is not where you want to be. Everybody lives mediocrity, but nobody achieves tremendous success with mediocrity. And so you need to be very discreet in your goal setting. You really can't. That's one thing that people don't do hard enough. They need to share their goals with people that are relevant for them in a very concrete way, and they need to hold themselves accountable. And there's all kinds of ways that you can do that. You can put yourself at risk. You can, guarantee that you're going to give money to a group that you hate if you don't accomplish the goal by this time period. There's all kinds of things. But I have to tell you that there's a dopaminergic response that can sometimes occur, and people build castles in the sky without ever accomplishing anything. And some people, this is the whole gaming concept. They get a tremendous dopamine release by playing these video games, but they haven't accomplished anything. Yeah, they've got a SimCity that's amazing and running really well, but that doesn't translate to anything in reality. And so building castles in the sky doesn't do you any good. Your castles have to be real, and you can't be folding yourself into somebody else's game. The only person that's doing well off of that sim concept is the developer, because they sold you an entertainment tool, but that entertainment tool doesn't accomplish you anything. So you have to be very careful that your goals are tangible, direct, and result in the result that you want. You may be really good at building sims, and you may be really good at playing games on video stuff, but that's not necessarily going to make you a better human being. And in fact, may distract you from reality. So that goal setting is the critical element, and understanding what a real goal is and breaking it down so that you can accomplish it.
And that's probably a whole episode on its own, because goal setting is, everyone throws those terms around, but it's actually getting stuck in dirty and managing to create them so that they work, right? Again, instead of taking those castles in the sky and making it a reality. Thank you so much.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you.
It's been awesome. Thank you so much. And I look forward to speaking to you very soon.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Puna.
All right.
Bye, everyone. Bye. Thank you for listening. And thank you for listening right to the end. Now, if you want to know more about breaking fear and if it's keeping you stuck, check out the quiz. The details are below. Subscribe so you can hear some more of this delicious conversations. And then watch out for my book, The Clank of Chains, which is coming out very soon. Thank you again for being here, and we will see you next time. Bye.